Okay, welcome back, everybody. Rabbi Shay's not here this week, so if you have any technical questions, hopefully I can solve them also. And we're going to start in 1 second. I'll share the source sheet, and here we are. Okay, today is class number 5 on Vayikra, and our title today is we're going to focus on chapter 6 and 7 and the word Torah, and a connection between the word Torot and Matan Torah. It's a complicated title, but hopefully you'll understand by the time this year is over. Okay, so last week we did the Chatat Olah combination. We talked about the difference between a Chatat of the Yachid that we had in chapters 4 and 5. That's when someone does something wrong, we had what's called Slicha. That's just Kapra, also Slicha. And then we had the Chatat Olah combination starting the 7 days of Miluim, and we have it all through this whole section. We had that here and also in all these sections where it's not necessarily because you did something wrong, but it's to get you ready for the next level in your connection to God. It's preparation. And we have kapara, but not slicha. So today we're going to go back to chapter 6 and 7, as I've highlighted. And there's a unit. The first thing I want to do is identify the unit and then try to explain. I want to begin today to try to understand how Sefer Vayikra comes together. So let me just summarize what I want to do today. I want to first identify chapter 6 and 7, why they're a unit and what's the topic of the unit. Then we'll talk about possibly when it was given. And then we'll talk about how Sefer Vayikra is organized as a whole and how it would help us understand what the purpose of the book is and how the book comes about. So I'm going to begin by taking a look at chapter 6 and 7, explaining why it's a unit, and then we'll see how this unit fits into the rest of Sefer Vayikra. So we'll go back to the front section later on. It starts as follows. First of all, it's a new dibor. But whenever there's a dibor, that's always a unit. Now, this unit is a commandment to Tzavet Aaron be'benav lemor. This is a commandment to Aaron and his sons. If I go back to, let me show you something which is really nice and simple. If I go back to Sefer Vayikra, in the first chapter of Sefer Vayikra, where are we? Here. This is chapter 6 also. Tzavet Aaron be'benav lemor. If I go back to chapter 1, God calls Moshe and tells him, tell Bnei Israel the laws of if a person wants to bring a korban, a voluntary korban, it can be an olah, mincha, and a shlamim. That was chapters 1 through 3. In chapters 4, that was the next dibor. God tells Moshe, daber Bnei Israel. If a person unintentionally did something wrong, but he did something but it was wrong and unintentional, he brings a korban, and that continues all the way through chapter 5. And in the middle of chapter 5, in Pasuk Gimel, in Pasuk Daled, God tells Moshe, another case that's called the Olebio. That was the Milot, and then finally there's more dibors, but all these dibors are for the people of Israel. Then we get to chapter 6, and what do we find? One dibor, but this is Tzavet Aaron be'benav lemor, and that's going to continue all the way through chapter 6. Including the beginning of chapter 7. Where's chapter 7? Vayikra. We'll talk about each header, etc. In the middle of chapter 7, towards the end actually, in Pasuk Chabet, all of a sudden we have a dibor to Bnei Israel again, in verse 22, and we have a dibor again in chapter 20, in verse 28. God tells Moshe, daber Bnei Israel. So we're going to have a unit, we'll see, that begins with the commandment for Aaron and his sons, and in the middle of this unit, we'll see why it's the middle of the unit, not the end of the unit, we have 2 extra dibors to the people of Israel. We have to explain why. So now we're going to go back to the main source sheet, and I'll try to explain what's going on with a little bit of highlighting. I'm hoping I use these tools right. Now, the key phrase here, which I want to highlight in this section, again, we're not going to read all the Hebrew, but the Hebrew is there simply to highlight. God does command Aaron, Zot Torah Olah. This is I'm not going to translate the word Torah. This is I'll call it Baber procedure for how to bring a Korban Olah, a burnt offering. Then we have Zot Torah Mincha, next topic. Then we have Zot Torah Chatat, the next topic. Zot Torah Asham, Zot Torah Zebach Hashamim. All I'm highlighting is that there's a unit, a commandment for Aaron and his sons. This is the procedure to how to bring different korbanot. If I go back to my original flowchart we had, Remember, you come to the temple, are you a worker or a visitor? So we deal with what the visitor does. Now here's what the employees do. If you're a Kohen coming to work in the temple, it's your turn to work, then here's the procedure to how to bring a burnt offering. Here's how to bring a flour offering. Here's how to bring a mincha offering, what do you want to call that? A sin offering, a chatat, an asham, and a shlamim. Now, we'll talk about the different, in a shlamim, there's two categories. There's a todah and a korban todah and dava we'll talk about. And then there'll be two diburs to the people of Israel in Pasach Habet. I said later in Pasach Habchet, I should have highlighted this as well. The Bel B'nai Yisrael there as well. And I'm going to just go all the way here to the end. I hope you understand now all the yellows. Why is this a unit? Because it begins, command Aaron and his sons, Sotorat Olah, Sotorat Mincha, etc., etc., etc. And when we're done, we get one final summary pasuk that says as follows: Zot HaTorah. This is the procedure or the Torah, the instruction for the Olah, the Mincha, the Chatat, the Asham, Miluim, the Sevach HaShlamim. So what's making this a unit is because it begins with Zot Torah Olah, etc., Zot HaMincha, etc. At the very end of the unit, I have Zot HaTorah Olah, Mincha, Chatat, Asham, sort of a summary of the whole unit. And when were they commanded? And again, I'm going to move this to English in a second. Asher tziva Hashem et Moshe b'Har Sinai, which God commanded Moshe at Har Sinai, on the day He commanded Am Yisrael to bring their korbanot in Midbar Sinai. Now, a word about chronology, and help me out here. From a chronological point of view, when did Sefer Vayikra begin?
After the Mishkan is set up and it's about to start.
Which is, and we have the date from the end of Sefer Shemot. That's the first day of Nisan in the second year. The book begins, Vayikra Moshe me'ol moed lemor. God tells Moshe, He spoke to Moshe these laws from the Ol Moed. Now we have a set of laws. We have a unit. And when were these laws given, according to Chumash? On Har Sinai, which has to be before. And this is a set of laws that Moshe received from God about how to bring korbanot on Har Sinai.
At? Does it have to be at?
No, it's like, I'll read it again. Look carefully. Okay. Zot HaTorah lo'olam mincha chatat l'Hashem v'zav Hashamim. Asher tziva Hashem et Moshe b'Har Sinai. God commanded these commandments at Har Sinai, b'Har Sinai, or on Har Sinai, on the day He commanded them to bring their korbanot in Midbar Sinai. Now, I'll do a little thing in grammar. Okay. Remember, anyone ever do diagramming sentences way back? Yeah, like back in you have to, I forgot what it looked like. You had to diagram a sentence, but I'll annotate for a second. Is this, where are we? Here's my little line here, right? This Midbar Sinai, is this where the commandment was given? Okay. Or is this where Bnei Yisrael are going to bring their korbanot? Understand the difference between the two? These are laws that Moshe taught Bnei Yisrael on Har Sinai. On the day He commanded Bnei Yisrael to bring their korbanot in Midbar Sinai, is Midbar Sinai where the commandment was given, or where Bnei Yisrael is supposed to bring their korbanot?
Where the commandment was given.
But it could also be the other way, right? It could be when He commanded Bnei Yisrael to bring their korbanot in Midbar Sinai. But it could be commanded them. It could be commanded on Har Sinai that Bnei Yisrael should bring korbanot in Midbar Sinai. Because we're in Midbar Sinai after the Mishkan is built. We're in Midbar Sinai for another month and a half, aren't we? Once the Mishkan is built, we'll still Midbar Sinai. In fact, the commandments to bring if I go back to the beginning of Sefer Vayikra, the commandment to bring the Korban Yachid, the Korban Dava, the Olah and Mincha and Shlamim, that was given in the Mishkan, not on Har Sinai, but in the Mishkan that's in Midbar Sinai. Hope I'm trying to make it not too confusing. But why is it important? What other commandments were given on Har Sinai?
Mishpatim.
Okay, anything, but all the laws of the Mishkan were given on Har Sinai, weren't they? All the commandments to build the Mishkan were given on Har Sinai. You can argue on the first 40 days or last 40 days, but the commandments to build the Mishkan were given on Har Sinai, including what?
They stay on Har Sinai, and then 2 years
No,
after.
they stayed Midbar State for 1 year.
Okay,
Am
1 year.
Yisrael is encamped in Har
But
Sinai
that's a long time.
from the third month of the first year to the second month of the second year.
Okay.
Right? It's almost a year less 10 days. Those are explicit psukim.
Yeah.
What I'm getting at is that when we get to Har Sinai, we enter a covenant 7 days later. Moshe goes up for 40 days and gets a set of laws, remember? And then in the meantime, we have Chet Egel. Moshe davens for 40 days, gets a new contract. And the last set of 40 days, we get God's attributes of mercy and more laws. Now, there's a big argument whether the laws about how to build the Mishkan were given on the first 40 days or the last 40 days, but either way, they're given on Har Sinai, correct? Now, the laws on Har Sinai, this is why I did this share, that's why I needed last week's share first. The laws of the 7-day Miluim, remember? That was during the 7 days of Miluim, we bring a Chatat Olah and Shlamim, correct? And then in Yom Shmini, we bring it, the whole fancy thing. Now, we actually do that Korban as we build the Mishkan, but the commandment to do that was given on Har Sinai. Now, therefore, if on Har Sinai we're commanded to bring a Korban Olah, and Olah Tamid also, and a Chatat Olah for the 7 days of Miluim, and a Shlamim, then already on Har Sinai, God had told Moshe Rabbeinu how to bring the Korbanot. What's the Kiddush? What I'm getting at? Let me explain what I'm saying so much time on this. Most people think that all of Sefer Vayikra was given from the Oil Moed, except for Parshat Bahar. Who grew up thinking that? Did not most people? Am I have it wrong or not? Most people remember Sefer Vayikra begins on a timeline. The Mishkan is built, and the first thing God tells Moshe, when the Mishkan is built, everyone's welcome to bring a Korban. And then everyone thinks the rest of Sefer Vayikra are all laws given from the Oel Moed. But it could be that only the first 3 chapters are from the Oel Moed, and it could be everything else was given on Har Sinai. Now, what's my litmus test? Every time there's a law, the question is, would this law have made sense before Chet Egel? Or is this law because something happened in the meantime? Got my point? Every time there's a law, for example, let me jump ahead. Yoshim Tiyu, Ki Kadosh Hashem, all the laws of chapter 19, which we know by heart. Right? Are those laws only given after the Mishkan is built? Or should those laws have been given on Har Sinai? The laws of Arayot. Remember all the Arayot, what we read on Yom Kippur. The laws of the Moadim, in Parshat Emor. What do you call it? Shavuot, the Yom HaBikurim, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, everything. Are those laws all given on Har Sinai before the Mishkan is built, or only after the Mishkan is built? And then the question is, when they get to Parshat Bahar, why am I mentioning Bahar Sinai? Because only these were in Har Sinai, or there's something special about those laws that go back to Har Sinai? I'm dealing with chronology of the book, but I'm getting at the laws in Sefer Vayikra. How many of the laws were actually given on Har Sinai? And on Har Sinai, is it the first 40 days or second 40 days? We can argue. And then, are there any laws only given after the Mishkan is built? So I can understand a law that after the Mishkan is built, especially after the sin of the golden calf, that even though you sinned, an individual can bring a korban. But the idea of a nation bringing a korban was beforehand. But I'm getting at, how many laws are unique to the fact that Mishkan is now built, and how many of these laws should have been given on Har Sinai already beforehand? Okay, so we're gonna deal with that in a minute. Okay, again, Ein Mukdam Muchar, exactly. But the question is that then, if Sefer Vayikra is a set of laws that are not necessarily in chronological order, then what order are they in? Okay. Wait, Ruth, unmute Ruth. You were saying something.
It's a thematic.
It's got to be thematic, yeah.
Of course. Wait. Also, isn't it possible? I know you don't want to do this, but as soon as I learned how to read Ibn Ezra, and it's in high school and middle school, isn't it possible that Moshe gets everything and he teaches it piece by piece? So to ask, did God give these laws on Har Sinai to Moshe, yes, he got everything. And then Moshe doles it out when he sees the need or at the appropriate time.
Okay, but every section begins with what? Vaydaber Hashem Moshe lemor.
He did say that.
Yeah.
He said it
Oh,
all
in
at
front of
once,
them. Okay. So
but he
what
didn't.
you're saying is the Chizkuni at the end of Kitis and Kitisa, we'll get to that Chizkuni. In fact, it's going to be on the end of the source sheet today. We'll get there. Because the word Torah, it's about how the Torah came about. Now, but I'm spending time on that because speaking of Ibn Ezra, what's your default assumption when I'm reading Chumash? Is my default assumption that I'm reading something in chronological order unless I have a really good reason to say otherwise? Or is my default assumption it's in thematic order and when the laws were given is irrelevant? Now, if I'm dealing with an historical text like Sefer Shemot, then it makes sense the default would be chronological order. If I'm dealing with a book which is 90% laws, right, then maybe it's thematic order. Now, here's the tricky part. Here's why we did this for today. Let's look again at the last line. I'm going to share an English Hebrew screen now. I just want to review again. This is a clear unit. It's no doubt. Chapter 6 and 7 is a standalone unit. Chapter 8 is going to be the 7 days of Miluim, how they're done. Look at this last pasuk, and we'll do this together. We're going to read the summary again. Zot HaTorah la'olah lamincha v'lachata v'lasham v'lamiluim v'lezebach hashlamim. How about I don't have to translate? Because this word's in Hebrew. This is the procedure, the law for the olah korban, the mincha, the chatat, asham, the miluim, and zebach shlamim. What's wrong here? There's one thing here which doesn't fit. If this is a
Miluim? You don't like the Miluim there?
I don't like it. What's it doing? Let me share the different screen for a second. I'll go back to my source sheet, the colorful one. Okay, let's look again. Now we can make it smaller again. This is our unit. What do we have? Zot Torah, got it? La'olah, lamincha, got it? We'll get back to this here in a minute. The chatat, asham, zebach shlamim. What's missing? Here we have, I'll make it bigger now to make it see it again. Okay. So this is Olah's there, exactly in this order. Mincha, Chatat, Asham, Miluim. No, it's the Miluim. What's it doing there? So what's Rashi say? Rashi says the Miluim is referring to the Mincha here. There's a little sort of parenthetical note. After Torah Mincha, there's the Korban that Aaron has to bring on the day they're inaugurated. It's called the Mitchat Chinuch. I'll take a quick break to explain. When you say to the average yeshiva bacher, Minchas Chinuch, or Minchas Chinuch, they think of a commentary on the mitzvot of every parsha. Remember, there's a book called the Minchas Chinuch, which takes the halachot, or the mitzvot, of the 613 mitzvot of every parsha, and has a discussion on them, and pilpul, etc. But his name is taken from here. But what's the real Minchas Chinuch? Every Kohen, his bar mitzvah sword, not bar mitzvah, but the first time he works in the temple, he brings an inaugural korban, and it's a mincha offering, it's a solat offering, a little thing, and the Kohen Gadol brings it every day. It's called the minchat chabitim. Okay, the Kohen Mashiach Taftav, he brings it every day in the temple, and because every day is like a new day, on behalf of all the Kohanim, and every Kohen brings it once in his lifetime, the first time he brings. So I could see that as a miluim, but then it's out of order. Now, what is explicitly called miluim in Chumash? The 7 days of miluim. That's explicit. Now, I hope this is a little complicated, but it's really simple. What's the next topic in chapter 8? I'll go to my Chumash again.
Miluim.
As the miluim, chapter 8, I'm sorry. Chapter 8 is the miluim. Okay. God tells Moshe, take Aaron and his sons, etc. And this is what we talked about last week. You bring a chatat olah for all the 7 days. And then, what do you call it? This is done for 7 days. So this 7 days of miluim, which is called explicit miluim, back in Parshat Tetzaveh, what we talked about last week was that these laws were given together with the laws of the Mishkan and Trumat Tetzaveh, but they're fulfilled in Sefer Vayikra. Remember we talked about the commandment to build it and to use it. Now, why is the next topic the Miluim? Because most likely the Miluim, we just mentioned the Miluim. Now think logically. Why does it make sense that the laws of the Miluim, the 70s Miluim, why were they given in Har Sinai together with the Mishkan? I want to make sure you follow the logic. Because it's part of building the Mishkan. Now, but if there's a law of the 70s and Miluim, which includes to bring a Korban Olah and a Mincha and a Chatat, remember? And a prototype Shlamim, the El Miluim, then what do I need? I need laws of how to bring them.
Sure.
So it only makes sense that the laws of how to bring Korbanot were given when?
Hello.
In Har Sinai. Now, I want to talk about now how the book was put together. Okay, I want to go back sort of what Ruth was saying about thematic order. For a very beautiful thematic reason, the book begins with the Korban Yachid. A voluntary Korban. Korban Yachid means an individual's Korban that an individual can bring a voluntary sacrifice. Now, and anyone know why in comparative religion, why is that so important? That any individual can bring a sacrifice to God.
Because that doesn't happen.
In
It has
other religions, only
the priest, only the big
Yeah.
shot.
Okay.
Yeah.
No
so the fact that every
intermediaries.
individual can bring, that's something, I would say revolutionary, but something unique. On top of that, I might think that after the sin of the golden calf, you can have a mishkan, but keep your distance. Okay? The fact that you're welcome, even though you did that in my fitness, the fact you did that terrible sin of the golden calf, I don't want to see you. No, I'll be with you, but you, the nation, not you, the individuals. The fact that every individual can come, that's a key point that I want to begin the book with. And then we talk about how we're connected to the end of Sefer Shemot. Now, those laws might have been given only as soon as the Mishkan is dedicated. No, in fact, that's going to be possibly the first time, the first dibur that Moshe gets from the Ol Moed. So therefore, the book begins with an individual can voluntarily bring a sacrifice to God. He can come and visit and bring something. Sometimes he has to come. That's the Chatat and Hasham that we talked about. And now that I finished my opening topic, oh, by the way, here's how to bring the Korbanot. And therefore the Torot. But I'm looking at chapters 6 and 7 as a parenthetical, like a side point, after I mentioned chapters 1 through 5 about the Korban Yachid of the voluntary Korban and the mandatory Korban, the Davan and the Chovah. No, okay. Hope I lost it. I'll try to review that one last time. Let me go to my. That's why I have this. Oh, where are we? Here's my outline. Okay, I hope this helps. The book begins with the voluntary offerings. It's a unit. Chapters 1 to 3 is a unit. And that the beginning of the book because a man can come close to God. The idea of Korban. Remember, the first time we have the word Korban in Chumash is in Sefer Vayikra. It stems from the idea of being close to God. You can't come empty-handed. You can bring, and you have a choice of what to bring. Sometimes you unintentionally did something that hurt the relationship. So sometimes I have to bring a Korban, a mandatory one, to fix my ways. After I have these two chapters, chapters 6 and 7 is how to bring the offerings, and those are Torot for the Kohanim, because only Kohanim need to know how to bring the offering. Right. Then I have the dedication. Now that I mentioned in the summary pasuk, all these laws were given back in Har Sinai. Since I mentioned they were given back in Har Sinai, and I mentioned the Miluim. Oh, by the way, here's how we did them. Here's how we actually fulfilled the Miluim, even though it was commanded in Parshat Tetzaveh. It's fulfilled only after the Mishkan is assembled. In fact, that's the key narrative of Sefer Vayikra is going to be chapters 8 through 10, which is a narrative form, which is really the continuation of the end of Sefer Shemot. Okay. Then when I finish, I have chapters 8 through 10 because of that little line at the end of chapter 6, 7. This was what God commanded Moshe Rabbeinu, which included the Miluim. Then I have the story of the Miluim and what happened on that day with Yom HaShmini and the tragedy that happened. And then I go back to my law section of all who brings the Chatat Olah notes. Who can't come to the temple temporarily, and how do you come back to the temple? And highlighting ending with the Yom Kippur thing. Then we get to part 2 in a minute of the book, how the book changes themes in chapter 18. No. All I was doing that simply try to explain what's going on in the book as far as units go. Now I want to give a simple reason why the miluim are right before the shlamim. Who remembers what happens in the miluim? But how is the miluim different than a regular shlamim? In general, who brings the korban? Who in the temple offers the sacrifice? Only the priest, only the kohen. But during the 7 days of miluim, there are no priests yet. Why? Because I need the 7 days of miluim to make them priests. So who's the acting kohen during those 7 days?
Oh,
Moshe.
Moshe.
In general, who gets to eat the korban? Who eats the olah?
Nobody.
Nobody.
That's not true. The
Oh,
mizbeach does. The altar eats it. Okay. I'll prove it to you in a minute. Okay.
The mizbech.
Now, the mizbeach, it's called achilat mizbeach. We'll see the highlight of that in a minute. Now, who eats the chatat? The mizbeach gets its part, gets the chelev and the dam, and then who eats the rest?
Kohen.
The kohen who offered it. Now, who's going to eat this chatat? If no one can eat the chatat, what do I do with it? I burn it. So the chatat of the 7 days of miluim is burnt because no one can eat it.
Doesn't Moshe eat the chatat?
No, he eats the shlamim. We'll read it in a minute, if I'm not mistaken. The chatat, we'll see in a minute. It's called chatat. It's called chatat hanisrafet. It's burnt. Like on Yom Kippur, any chatat whose blood goes indoors is burnt also. Now, there usually a shlamim who eats it.
The
Baal and the Kohen.
celebrant.
The person bringing eats it. But what does the kohen get? The kohen gets the chazeh and shok. He gets two prime pieces. The shoulder and the shoulder and chazeh is the shoulder, the flanken, and what's the chazeh is the chazeh is the breast. Shok, no, the shok is the polki.
Yeah.
You get a leg and the rib. I forgot the parts of the meat, but ask your butcher. But they're prime cuts of meat, and the rest the owners eat, and the mizbeach gets the chelev, gets the cholesterol that's not good for you, the fat that covers the abdominal cavity called the chelev. Now, so everyone gets to eat something, but the ela miluim, there's no coin to give it to. So Moshe gets one, and the other, the chazeh and shok, are one goes to Moshe, one is lifted and waved. Now, part of the ceremony, watch how perfect it is. Let's go back to the summary pasuk of the end of the unit. Let's take a look here. I'll use regular chumash this time. 1 second. I want to show you something. Here, someone asked me before about what they did with the chatat. Okay, we want to make sure. This is in chapter 8. They bring the par chatat. Aaron does smicha on it. Okay? They shecht it. Moshe takes the blood and puts on the four corners of the mizbeach. Okay, and he puts the blood on the rest of the blood. He puts on the bottom of the mizbeach. He takes the chelev, the fat, the fat around the abdominal cavity, and on the part around the liver and the two kidneys. That's called the chelev. That's called the emurim. He puts them on the mizbeach. Vetapar, that usually is eaten by the kohanim. No, vetapar remember the chatat is burnt. That usually only happens to a chatat pnimit, but this happens to a chat chitzonat, an outdoor chatat. Then he brings the olah, of course that they bring, and then the ayo, the ram. What do you call it? That's the ayo olah. I'm sorry. Then they take in the second ayo, which is ela miluim. They do smich on it. They shecht it, okay, and they sprinkle the blood on his earlobes, etc. And then they put the and on his sons, etc. Now the chelev and the chelev and the aliyah from aliyah is the fat of the back part of the animal, basically the same chelev, the murim it's called, go on the mizbeach, okay, and the shokayimim, and then we'll see it comes with bread as well. They put everything on Aaron's hands, and he waves it, and Moshe waves it, etc. And Moshe takes the chazeh, which later is going to be the present for the Kohen later. He waves it from the Elam Elohim. And now for Moshe, it's his part because he offered it. So he gets to eat tapit, but only Moshe eats it. Only during 7 days of Elohim. Okay? And then he takes the oil, etc. And that's the Elam Elohim. But it's a prototype shlamim. Because later what happens in Shlamim, the chazeh and shok go to Aaron, the person bringing it. Now, why do we do all that? Let's go back to chapter 7. I started the summary too late. Okay, the summary begins here. Okay, there's a law that from the Shlamim, the Dorot here, God tells Moshe as follows. The last dibor here is a commandment for Bnei Israel. Why? The Kohanim need to know how to bring it, but the owners need to know what they get. So Daber Bnei Israel, tell them as follows. Hamakriv zebach shlamav l'Hashem yavit korbanot l'Hashem zebach shlamav. When you bring a korban shlamim, it belongs to the owner. Okay, you bring it. You have to be a note from Hashem. What goes to God? What does God get? The chelev. Okay, and the chazeh he waves them. Okay, the kohen takes the chelev on the mizbeach. Okay, and the chazeh goes to Aaron and his sons, and the shok hayamin also goes to the kohen from the Sefer. So we get the chazeh and shok go to the kohen. So who gets it? Hamakriv v'dam shlamim, the kohen who officiates, who sprinkles the blood, and who offers the chelev from Bnei Aaron, he gets the shok and the chazeh. Why? Ki the chazeh, the let's just call it chazeh from now on. The shoulder piece and the leg piece and the polki, okay, that are waved, okay. I took from Bnei Israel. The korban belongs to the Jewish people, and I take it from Bnei Israel. I'm giving it from the shlamim, and I'm giving to Aaron HaKohen and his sons. It's Allah forever. Now, what's the summary? This is sort of the here mishchat. It's consecration, but this is from now on. This is what he gets from the korban. Listen carefully now. Okay, this is the reward or the compensation, probably is a better word, that Aaron and his sons get from the korbanot, and all the commentaries does not on the day, but from this day on, whenever they bring korbanot, when they serve God. Asher tziva Hashem et Moshe letet lahem. Remember, the shlamim belongs to the owner, but the owner has to give these two pieces to the kohen who does the work. On the day they were anointed, they get these korbanot from Bnei Israel, and here's the key word: chukat olam ledorotam. Now, what's the word here? Chok mean? It's a chok olam ledorotam.
Portion. It's their portion, or it is just the statute, or both.
Yeah. Who remembers back in Egypt? Right? Was there a certain thing the Kohanim in Egypt got?
Yeah, they had a chak. It was called a chuk also.
There was a chok. Remember, they got a fifth from the land. There was a chok.
That was a
Yosef
Yosef thing.
I think something that's set that doesn't change is called a chok. It's called a statute.
Hello?
Yeah. So from that time on, the chok is going to be. Let me do the. Let me just quick do it.
Time.
I'll fix it in a second.
What time is the
Okay, sorry about that. So a chok is something that's set. What are we setting here? From now on, what did the Kohanim get? Every time you bring a shlamim, they get their cut. Pun intended. They get those two cuts of meat, the chazeh and the shok. The owner gets the whole animal, and the mizbeach gets. Everyone gets their part of achilah. Now, the original shlamim, the prototype shlamim, is Ela Miluim. Now you understand the order? The Ela Miluim is a prototype shlamim. But it didn't have the laws of shlamim because there aren't kohanim yet who can eat it. That's why it's a prototype shlamim. But those laws were given in preparation to explain what we do with the shlamim. In light of that, let's look again at the summary pasuk, which is perfect now. Right? What happened? Zota Torah. I'm sorry. Where we go? We have all these laws of the commandments for the kohanim, how they bring it. A commandment for Bnei Yisrael, they need to know that the chazeh and shok belong to. They have to give to the kohen, and when it's over, this is the reward Aaron and his sons get from these korbanot. Here's my summary. Here's the Torah. Bigger again. This is the Torah. I made it too big. Here we go. This is the procedure for the olam chachatat and miluim and zevach shamim. All these laws were given together, meaning all the laws of chapter 6 and 7 belong where? In Truma Tetzaveh. Have it? Because in Tetzaveh is where we have the miluim. So really, all these laws were given chronologically together with Truma Tetzaveh, either the first 40 days or the last 40 days, depending on the whole Chet Ego thing. And they're only recorded here instead. Why? Because we saved them. And going back to what Ruth was talking about, why the book is a mosaic, pun intended. In other words, what does Moshe do? He has different laws he received from different times, but when he writes down Chumash in the 40th year, he puts it all together. We're going to see that now at the end of this year. That's why I spent so much time on this. I want to try to understand how Chumash is put together and how it explains this whole idea of In Mukdam U'Muchar. It's a really complicated, I see it's complicated, but the reason I'm spending time on it is because it helps you understand the rest of Chumash, because once this is how Vayikra is built, I can apply this to all the other books as well. Now, these were laws that God commanded Moshe on Har Sinai, but in Trumat Tzaveh, right? On the same day that he commanded Am Yisrael about bringing their korbanot in Har Sinai. Now, again, what Midbar Sinai is that where it was given, or when they're bringing, that's a technical issue. But these laws were all given before Perek Aleph, chronologically. Perek Aleph it makes Perek Aleph more unique. Now remember, let me show you one other, my first korban consumption. I just did this real cute for you. Pay attention to this. I did a little highlighting here. I did a search on Word for the word Aleph Chaf Lamed, the Ochel. And I told the computer to highlight in blue everything to have the word Ochel, okay, in this unit. So now I make it nice and small and you can see all the blue. Okay. This is chapter 6 and 7 in small. But what's it highlighting? Whoa, you see that? You see the blue? Hope you got that and make it look even smaller. Just look at the blue for a minute. Because every time I have the source Aleph Chaf Lamed, which is to eat, which is our pastime, definitely Jewish pastime. So, but this is what's called korban consumption. That was supposed to be alliteration. Okay? No, Achilat Mizbeach. Who eats the korban? And therefore, what puts this unit together? It's organized by who gets to eat what. So look at what's the first topic? Zot Torah Olah, because what happens? The Mizbeach eats the whole thing. The Eish eats the Deshen. I mean, the fire consumes everything on the Mizbeach. And then what does the eating on the Mizbeach? The fire. Got it? So who does the eating? The Eish on the Mizbeach. Now there's tons of drashot on Eish Tamid, and everyone has a Nir Tamid in the shul in America. And that's the Shekhinah is always there. That's all beautiful. But from a technical point of view, the Eish Tamid here is the fire that consumes the korbanot. Because that's God's consumption. Because the idea of sharing a korban with God is key. The fact that you share a meal together is beautiful. The idea of everything going to God is fine. The fact that later I share a meal with God, that's going to be the add-on. Then I have a mincha, the solat offering. And then what happens there? The mizbeach, the altar gets what's called the komech. You get a handful that goes on the altar, and the rest the owners eat. So the altar gets part, the owners get part. I'm not saying that the owners, the kohen who bring it gets the other part. My mistake. It's kodesh kodeshim. It's only kohanim eat the leftover from the mincha. And then, but if a kohen brings the mincha, the whole thing goes on the mizbeach after the komets, after taking the handful. Then we have the chatat, who eats what? The mizbeach eats the chelev and the dam, and the kohanim get to eat the rest of the meat. Okay. But if the chatat's brought indoors, then the whole thing is burnt. Okay. Then we have the yasham, the same thing as the chatat. Then we have the zebach hashlamim, which is special. Why? Because everyone gets a piece now. The owners eat part, the kohen eats part, and the mizbeach gets part. I was just highlighting the ochel. You can look at it later on your own. Just highlighting how much food is into this. Now, then we talk about the summary line. What's missing? Got it? Oh, here, I just have it nice and highlighted for you. Zot bishchat oran we talked about. Let I got. Zot Torah lo'olam mincha chatav sham velamiluim. That was a missing word, which God commanded on Har Sinai on the day He commanded to bring in the Bar Sinai. This is highlighting what we did before inside. Now, why do we do all this? So there's going to be two take-home messages. One is how to study Chumash, and what's it mean to keep kosher. What does it mean to keep kosher? Because what do we do? I'll take a quick break about kosher meat. We'll get to it later in the year. We have a better opportunity for it when we get to what's called what we keep it with the laws of kashrut. In theory, if you read Sefer Dvarim, also later in Vayikra, every time you eat meat, it should be an offering to God. That's going to be explicit in Vayikra chapter 17. Chapter 17, I think. Yeah. Every time you eat meat, it should be a korban. That's easy to do if you're living in the desert with the Mishkan at the center of your camp in walking distance. Okay? It's very difficult in the future. But people have to eat meat. And I don't want people bringing bamot. So what happens? So what's the Torah saying in Sefer Dvarim? If you can't go to the Mishkan to eat meat, what do? Right? You can bring it at home, but treat it as though it's a sacrifice. Why? Because if it was a sacrifice, what would God get?
Fat.
He'd get the dam, the
And-
blood on the
and the
mizbech,
fat.
and the chaylev that covers it. Understand? Now, what do we do instead? We checked it, the same laws of shechita like a korban. Anything that would have gone on the altar goes where? You can't have it. And if you eat it, boy, the punishment is really harsh. It's called chayiv karet. We'll read about it in a minute. Understand? In other words, when we keep kosher, we're basically every time we shechta, every time we want to eat meat, theoretically it's a type of a korban. It should be a korban, but whatever would have been on the altar, instead you can't eat. That's called chaylev and dam, which is kosher meat, isn't it? Now, tons of people keep kosher and usually don't realize how it relates to korbanot, which is sharing a meal with God. Now, why is eating meat so important in your relationship with God? Not for starts eating meat, but what's the danger in eating meat? Think like a glutton for a minute. Think about gluttons for a minute. Right? Eating meat sometimes comes with, it's called being a glutton in a good way, in a bad way. There's nothing wrong with eating meat, but something's wrong with if that's your whole life. But to eat meat, you have to kill another living being, ask any veggie who's even if he doesn't believe in God, but they believe in human life, whatever they believe in. But there's a natural idea that how can I kill another animal? Because you kill animals, I'll end up killing other people. In other words, what gives humans the right to kill other animals? That's a big deal. Therefore, now, but we're different than animals. That's the whole theme of Tzelem Elokim. So every time, if I'm going to eat an animal, I need to remember that I'm created in God's image and I'm different than an animal. I need to do something symbolic to remember that I'm not an animal and I'm different than an animal, even though what right do I have to live more than an animal has? The right I have is because God made me in his image and I'm his partner in creation. So we eat animals, but I need to do something to make sure that eating animals doesn't make me act like an animal. It reminds me I'm not an animal. And therefore that's going to be the korban. Now, if people thought about that when they eat meat, that would be helpful. So in the temple, that's how we did it. But the idea of kosher meat all goes back to the theme of Tzelem Elokim, which has been a theme ever since day one, at least day 6 or day 3, and day 6 of creation. Anyway, that's a side point. Let me just show you inside where we have it, and then we get to our Torah topic. If I open up Chumash, back to chapter 7, after we have the laws of Shlamim, in verse 22, we had Zot Torat HaShlamim, where does it say? Zot Torat Hasham and Zot Torat, here, Zot Torat Zevach HaShlamim. Here's how to bring it. Depends. Later we'll talk about the Todah and the Davat, the two different types. Now, that was a law for the Kohanim. Then God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, tell Bnei Israel, any chaylev from the kosher animals that would be a korban, that's a shor and kesef or eis, right? Remember the beginning of Vayikra? Shor, kesef, eis? Those are the three main animals you bring sacrifices from. The chaylev you can eat. And then we have law about a chaylev and a vela or chaylev trefa. Which weren't checked properly. Right? You can use them, but you can't eat them. But if you eat chaylev, what's your punishment? Chaylev from an animal that could have been a korban, what happens? You're cut off from the covenant. Karet always is something covenantal. Now, if these belong in the temple on the Mizbeach, what does the temple have to do with covenant? Everything, right? That was our whole point. That was our first 2 classes. That the Mishkan is a mini Har Sinai, isn't it? And Har Sinai reminds us of our covenant with God. So if the temple is our symbol of our commitment to be God's people at Har Sinai, and coming close to God in the temple is remembering your covenantal commitment to be God's people, and you can't come empty-handed, and therefore you come and you share a meal with God. And when you share that meal with God, the chaylev and the dam go on the altar. If I don't respect that law, right? Therefore what? You're cut off from the covenant. I'm trying to give a reason why, of all laws, why is eating chaylev and dam so fundamental why you're chayv karet. Okay? There aren't too many laws you're chayv karet. That in Shabbat. Remember, Shabbat is there's Mikdash is remember the covenant in the realm of space. Shabbat in the realm of time. Those are your big karets thing. Now, and therefore, kol dam you don't eat it wherever you go, including also for when you bring a chicken. Also, remember you sprinkle the blood on the mizbeach. And chickens don't have chalev, if you know your biology. Okay, now, and again, and anyone who eats dam, he's cut off from his people. Then there's then Tabnei Yisrael. What does the Kohen get from the thing? He gets the chazen shok. Now, we're not going to finish the source sheet today. We'll finish this next week. But here, let's go back to our source sheet. So I turned from a very complicated technical share into a halacha l'maisa, pretty much about the meaning of kosher meat. Now, let's go back to our source sheet. Okay. So again, we have the summary of okay. Now let's go back to the meaning of the word. What happened to me here? I can make this too bigger here. We have all these Torah. We have the Torah of these things. Okay. Now I want to go back. Actually, sorry about this. Give me one more second. I meant to do one more thing with my Chumash. After I have the 7 days of Miluim and Yom HaShmini, which we'll talk about separately. If I get to the laws, remember we talked about the Yoledet. Let's just real quick go to chapter 12. What do we have? What's it say at the end? So Torah, where does it happen? What happened to it? This Parshat Tezriah. Here it says, Zot Torah Tayoledet Zachar Nekeva. That's in chapter 12. This is the Torah, the procedure for Yoledet, whether she gives birth to a male or a female child. Okay. 13 is how to get tzarat, and 14, right? This is the procedure. Torah Mitzorah. Here's the procedure for Mitzorah when he's tahor, and when the whole chapter is over, we have a beautiful summary. Zot HaTorah, l'chodeg hatzarat, l'netek v'tzarat, l'beged, etc. Lo tabei ben hator. Here's the whole procedure for the tzarat. Chapter 15. We have Tumat Zav, etc. There's a whole bunch in the middle, but the end. Zot Torah Hazav, Asher Tim B'Shem Chazera, B'Davav B'Nyatav Hazav Etzavo, etc. What do we have in all these chapters? In chapters 12, 13, 14, and 15, we have Torot. So we had them in chapters 6 and 7. Now we go back to our source sheet. We'll see in a minute. There's a lot of Torot in this section of Sefer Vayikra. At the end of the book, now, I'm going to prove later on why chapter 26 is the end of the book and chapter 27 is an add-on. But at the very end of the Tochacha, we have a summary pasuk, which is the question, what's it summarizing? It says, Eila chukim b'mishpatim b'hatorot. See that line? Asher natan Hashem, listen carefully, Beino v'em b'nei Yisrael b'har Sinai b'yad Moshe. Now, pretend for a minute this is the end of the book, because we'll see why thematically it should be the end of the book. Chapter 27 is like an add-on. But is this line the end of the Tochacha, Parshat Bahar B'chukotai, or is it the end of the entire book? We'll see. Now, we have three phrases that talk about Jewish law. There's Chukim, which are things that are said that don't change, Mishpatim, and Torot, which God gave us. It didn't just say He gave us, but they're Beino Ubein B'nei Yisrael. That's covenantal lashon, isn't it? Between and between, we had that by Brit Kesher, by Brit Milah, by Brit Sinai, by Shabbat. Remember, Bein Beis Oti Lo'olam. Whenever I have Beino Ubein, that's something covenantal. Now, these laws were given on Har Sinai together with the covenant. That's why Parshat Bahar. These were all given on Parshat Bahar. But what are we summarizing here that was given on Har Sinai? So Chukim Shpatim come up a lot in Chumash, especially in Sefer Dvarim. But if I go back in Sefer Vayikra, we read this on Yom Kippur. There's a whole unit that begins in chapter 18 where we leave the Mishkan and talk about things outside the Mikdash. Don't act like an Egyptian, etc. Don't like Canaanites. Instead, et mishpatai tasu et chukotai tishmor lechem ani Hashem Elokechem ushmartem et chukotai et mishpatai asher yasatam b'chai behem ani Hashem. Then we have some chukim and then we have some mishpatim. Following, we have all the laws of the rest of Vayikra. So if I go back to my main source sheet, I want to show you where I'm going with all this. I want to try and understand what's happening in Sefer Vayikra. So what do we find? But here, I find in the beginning of the book, I have my volunteer offerings, mandatory offerings, and then I have Torot about how to offer korbanot. Then I have all these Torot about Torah Yoledet, Torah Zav, Zabab, Torah, etc. First half of the book. Starting in chapter 18, I have Chukim and Mishpatim as they're presented for him, and which takes us to the whole set of Chukim Mishpatim. We'll see later in this whole section of called Dusha, the realm of man, the realm of time, and the realm of space. And then when I end the blessing curses, if you keep them, if you keep the covenant, then I have a summary that summarizes the whole book. So the question is going to be, what is that final pasuk summarizing? Is the word Torot at the end of the book referring to this section, the first section, about how to bring korbanot, or is it referring to something else? So again, we'll have to deal with. I'm just giving an introduction to this idea, but it could be that summary pasuk, the Chukim Mishpatim, might be this whole second half of the book. Then the Torah is the first half of the book, and the question is, why are they the same book? What's to do with covenant? Now, I'm going to just jump to my conclusion. What I want to get to, because it has to do with how we're different than other religions. The beauty of having a temple is that God's presence is in the temple and you can visit him. That's great. What's the danger of having a temple? If God's in the temple, what's a possible downside?
That he's nowhere else.
Exactly. He's only in the temple. Right? And that's a question. You come visit God who's in the temple. What happens when you leave shul? I call it, resume normal speed. When I come to shul, okay, when I come to the Beit HaMikdash, I'm connecting to God, and I'm coming as my consumer. Here's my needs. When I leave, he's out of my life. Or is the visit to the temple, right, supposed to affect you when you leave the temple? Is the goal of the temple, God's presence, what happens when you leave? And that's why the two halves of Vayikra are so critical to the whole point of the book, where you need to come visit the temple, but when you leave the temple, what do you come home with Kedoshim to you? With how you live your life, how you don't act, how you do act, and that is so important to the whole idea of sanctuary, which goes back to how I apply it nowadays when you go visit shul. I'm just giving a class halacha l'maisa on Sefer Vayikra, which has nothing to do with our day-to-day lives, but has everything to do with that. That's why I'm spending so much time on it, is because there's such an important take-home message of the two halves of Vayikra. And that's why I'm making such a big deal that I have to focus on visiting God, and you can visit, but you have to be careful when you visit, and you can't visit all the time, and you have to prepare for your visit, and you can't come empty-handed, etc. You have to prepare for that, but the goal is leaving and what you do when you leave. So I need to make a big deal about visiting and a big deal about how the visit has to have an effect, because I'm coming as an employee again and not as a consumer. Now, I'll try to prove that as we go on, but that's why I'm making that's why I'm spending so much time on structure, because my whole point is structure leads to a thematic message. Now, what I end with today is, we'll have to do this later on. The word Torah is so confusing. Why? Because every time you have the word Torah, what do we always find one medrash is going to say? Torah shebichtav, Torah sheba'al-peh. We had it this week with this week's parsha. That's why I picked it today to talk about Torah, to match Parsha Toldot. Isn't this week Toldot? We read it at Mincha yesterday. What's Rashi say? Torah shebichtav, Torah sheba'al-peh. Now, again, that's midrashic. Every other parsha says something different. But what does the word Torah mean? Okay, so I'll give the introduction to the idea. Torah means a procedural set of laws. All through Chumash, up until Sefer Dvarim, the word Torah is always a procedural law. Yeah, it's on the source sheet now. I'm going to do the short version. We'll have to do it properly either next week or another time. Here, we did the unit, we did all this stuff, and we did this, and we did that. And we did the summary pasuk. Sorry about that. Okay, now, the meaning of the word Torah. So Moshe goes up to Har Sinai on the first 40 days, but I'm pretty sure the word Torah, we don't have it in, in Breshit we have it at one time. Avram kept his Torah. What that means, that's a good question. read your local parshan. You do homework for the week. It's a good shir for Parshat Shavua. Now, Moshe goes up. We have here we have. I have it here in the source sheet right here in Breshit. We have it, but it seems to be something specific because there's Mishpatim, Mitzvotai, Chuktai, V'Toratai. Now, in Sefer Shmot, it's going to be there's the Torah of how to bring Torah Yad Lechem Laker Pesach by Korban Pesach. All through Vayikra, what we had today, chapter 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all that stuff through 14, 15, and 16. Now, the main one is when Moshe goes up for the first 40 days. He goes up to get Luchot Even, the Torah and the Mitzvah. And what Torah is that? But that's all we'll share in Sefer Dvarim. We'll see. It's not what we call Torah. It's a set of instructions, which later becomes the laws of Sefer Dvarim. Now, that's all we'll share to prove that the word Torah in Sefer Dvarim refers to the whole set of laws. But what's going to be beautiful is that if there's a person has to bring a certain sacrifice, there's a procedure how to bring an olah, a procedure how to bring a shlamim, how to bring a chatat, etc. Those are technical procedural laws. Later in Sefer Bamidbar, there'll be a procedure for the Torah Taknaot. There's Torah Tanazir. But the word Torah is always a specific procedure to accomplish something for Kohanim doing something. What's beautiful about Sefer Dvarim, I have a Torah for Mamlechet Kohanim, because the goal of a Kohen bringing an Olah or a Shlamim is to do the procedure the right way. The goal of a Mamlechet Kohanim is to represent God. So the whole set of laws of how to become a nation representing God. Remember our judicial system, loving God, fearing God, all laws of Dvarim, all the different sections. That's going to be this. It's all summarized here. Then there's the word Torah is all through Sefer Dvarim. It introduces a speech. It's what the king has to write down. But the laws in Dvarim are referred to as a Torah because it's a procedure of how to become a nation representing God. It's about how you it starts with our national center, deals with your judicial system, your political system, your political leaders, how you run your society, how you go to war, how you make sure there's justice and righteousness in your community. There's a whole set of laws of how to become a nation. Later on, the word Torah is a whole set of laws for how to live a life as a Jew. And the specific meaning in Vayikra is very instrumental to understanding its wider meaning later in Sefer Dvarim. Now, what Ruth was referring to about how the Torah was given, this is a famous Chizkuni. I'll do the English part. He says as follows, and somebody want to quote what Ruth mentioned beforehand. When it says that Moshe went up on Har Sinai for the first 4 days and second 4 days, when he comes down, he teaches them all the laws God told him on the first 4 days and second 40 days. The Chizkuni makes the following observation. Okay, he says all the commandments that were told to God, to Moshe Rabbeinu, were given either on the first 40 days or the last 40 days, or when we left Egypt, or when we were encamped in Har Sinai, until we left Har Sinai in the 20th of Iyar. That's when we leave Har Sinai when the cloud goes up. Got it? That's in Bamidbar. Now, however, he says the Torah was given in individual, what's called Megillah, individual scrolls. For whenever a Moshe would hear a commandment from God, he would record it in a separate scroll. Okay. Then 40 years later, when it comes, I like to say, God tells Moshe, publish and perish. Okay. For it's time to die, he organizes a Sefer Torah and sets it into parshiot, different sections, based on fitting juxtapositions, as the rabbis have expounded. I should have brought the Hebrew, but basically based on smichut parshiot. What Chizkuni is saying, basically, he's quoting the Gemara in Yitin Daf Samach in the Tosfot there. He's saying there's two opinions whether Megillah was given Megillah, or all put together at the end. But if I follow Megillah, we're saying that during the 40 years, Moshe receives lots and lots of laws. In the 40th year, when he publishes it, he has all these laws to publish. Instead of putting them all in one book or organized this by topic, he organized them into 5 different books, or at least 4 different books, if I keep Sefer Bereshit separately. And how he organizes them is based on, he purposely has juxtapositions for the rabbis to do K'moshe Darshu Rabbeinu. And basically what we're saying is that you study Chumash, you don't only study through content, but through context. So again, I just jumped way too quickly into that. But because you mentioned, I want to put it here, is that the word Torah which is a very technical word in Sefer Vayikra in this section, becomes a very super meaningful word when we understand what's going on in Chumash in general. Because a Torah is something, it's a procedural set of laws, usually very technical, but later becomes very instrumental because later every Jewish law, especially the entire Talmud, is called learning Torah. Because what's the Torah? It's how to be a nation serving God. So it's a procedure, but when you follow a procedure, always make sure you remember what the goal is. It's like following a recipe to make, if you're following a recipe to make, let's say, chocolate chip cookies. So it starts to take 2 eggs and flour, etc. If you don't understand the recipe, you put the eggs in with the shell, right, and mix it. Or you won't put it, if you don't understand what the goal of the procedure is, and you just follow the laws of the procedure like a robot, there's a good chance it won't come out right. And therefore, knowing what the procedure is about, what the purpose of the procedure is key for fulfilling the day-to-day instructions. I mean, that was my little thing. I have to check the chat. Any quick questions? Because I have to finish in 2 minutes. I have to leave in 2 minutes. But
Where
yeah.
does God's mention of when He gives the man? He says the purpose of the man is to say will that they will follow the Torah.
Yeah, that's it says. That's right. What's it say?
Asher b'shalach.
Atishmor mitzvot.
L'man anasenu hatishmor mishpat Torati.
Mitzvotai, I think it says, or not Toratai.
We're looking.
I'm pretty sure. Mitzvotai. I'm pretty sure. Let me take a real quick check. Wait, am I sharing my screen? Wait, let me open my screen share. That's before the. There we go. We want Exodus chapter 15. Let's see if it's still there. No, that's chapter 16. My mistake. Chapter 16 and verse 4 should be. Okay. Oh, no, you're right. My mistake. You're right. Halech b'toratim lo. Perfect. Okay. I'm testing will they follow my Torah or not. And that's a procedural law of how much to take. They're taking as much as you need and not taking on Shabbat. But before I give my Torah, my instructions, very good point. So there was the first man experience is, can you follow a law and follow instructions? And that prepares them for Matan Torah. Good point. Point well taken. Okay, we'll stop here this week, and next week we'll do now we'll go back in the Sefer Vayikra, and we have to do the next week we're gonna go to Yom Kippur pretty much. Because we have the Seir. Actually, I wanted to do the Seir later I wanted to match the Seir with, I'm trying to, whenever possible, to fit the content of Parshat Shavua with what we're doing in Vayikra. But the Sirim on the Yom HaShmini and Sirim of Yom Kippur are going to be, but that's going to set the stage for the rest of, for the, bring all the Korbanot together, and that'll take us to the second half of the book. So again, I want to finish the first half of the book next week and deal with the Torot and how all these Torot help us understand Yom HaShmini, how Yom HaShmini leads to Yom Kippur, which leads to our calendar, to our holiday calendar. Okay, so everyone have a good week, and regards again from Rabbi J. And somehow we'll get through this book. It's hard. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks so